I am so excited to introduce to all of you on the program today our featured guest, Kevin Barhydt, and he and I have something in common that he doesn't know. We've never met. This is the first time we've ever had a conversation. But when you get into his story, you'll understand why it's especially personal to me. Because at the age of 3 weeks old, little Billy here was in an adoption agency when Bill and Mary came and picked him and took him home. And forever they've been mom and dad. I know no other mom and dad. And in the story of Kevin Barhydt, as you will hear, that's our common connection. And with that, let me kind of welcome you in, Kevin, and say hello and thanks for being on the program.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So let's start right from jump here. Your story launches into, I believe, a search for your birth parents, right?
That's right. That's right. And thank you for sharing that. I was a little daunted for a minute when you said we had a hidden secret. I was ready to bolt. What don't I know? A lot of the story, interestingly enough, starts that way with the story that I wrote, Dear Stephen Michael's Mother, actually begins when I'm in my 40s. I'm working in New York City, and the woman that I work for knows that I'm leaving to go to another job and says, Kevin, I have to talk to you. We have something in common. And my heart starts pounding because I think, oh, what does she know that I don't know? She took me out for lunch that day, and she said, I'm a birth mother, and I gave up my twins. And she had known that I was adopted because I talk about it as gently as you do, just, this is what happened and this is who I am. And she encouraged me. She said, if you are ever interested in looking and searching, I'd be willing to just, be any kind of a helping hand that I could be. And she proceeded after that to really talk to me a bit about what it meant to her as a birth mother to relinquish her child, and what it meant to her to do a search and to find her children, because she had united and reunited with her children. It wasn't always easy. There was a lot of things that I heard that were hard and didn't quite work out. But she also encouraged me. And it was the first person in my life that really spoke to me in a way that really helped me to understand maybe what it might have felt like for my biological mother at the time when she relinquished me. Because a lot of people had always told me, Kevin, your mother loved you so much that she couldn't take care of you, so she put you up for adoption. And then I was told, of course, the subsequent message, and we loved you so much that we adopted you. And that's a wonderful story. And I think as a child, you said you were 3 months. I was 2 months old.
I was 3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks. I was in foster care for 2 months and then was placed and adopted at about a year. But those two messages can really, they sink in pretty quickly to a kid. I never knew a day when I wasn't adopted. I always just had that information in my head. It was just told to me probably at such a young age. But this woman, Roz Peer, she's passed now, who helped me with the beginning of my search, really helped me to understand that, it's not always as simple as that.
Up until that point, until that encounter, where did the issue of being adopted rest in your soul and in your mind? Did it matter? Did you ever think about it? And I ask that, Kevin, because in 100% honesty, I never gave it a thought. And I was, by the way, it wasn't like some surprise that was sprung on me when I was 22. It was always known. I can't say that I ever endured any sort of hazing or bullying or anything like that from kids. I think it's a different era. I don't think it mattered at all. And it didn't matter to me in the least because these two loving people were awesome. My parents are incredible. I love my parents, and I've never once wondered about the other side of the equation. And I'm wondering how that was resting in your soul.
That's a really great question. And this is an extraordinary conversation, one that I get to have sometimes, but rarely in public like this. And I'm so grateful. Just to stop for 2 seconds, the picture right here, if you can see it, that's the high school picture of my adoptive mother. That's Virginia. Now, if you want to say hi to Virginia, you can yell because she's right upstairs, right, literally sitting above us right now. Oh. This is my studio in the basement. My mother's 91 and lives with us.
Wow.
And my dad passed 10 years ago, my adoptive father, and that was really brutal on me. But my mom is now living with us. We built the apartment for her this past year. She's been with us for 8 years now. And, 91, she's trucking along. She's probably upstairs reading the newspaper, doing her puzzle. But, you mentioned a couple of things, and I'll just hit on 2 or 3 of them. First of all, you said, I always knew. You were kind of like me. I just knew. There wasn't any, we call it late discovery adoptee. Someone who was told maybe when they're 40, hey, you're not really my brother. Or, hey, really, you're not, that father you grew up with, that's not really your father. And we have a lot of that these days. And we understand it now as just the mixed families or the different kinds of families that there are now. And there's a lot more acceptance to it now. I mean, when you say it's a different time, oh my goodness, I'm 58 years old. In 1962, that was called the baby scoop era. That's when a lot of biological mothers who weren't supported by their families were very much so encouraged or coerced or, let's say, even threatened to not keep their children. And it's known widely in North America, especially United States of America and Canada, that many children were really relinquished in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been now. And that's, those are some of the things that really change. Well, I think that some of the things that don't change are the way that adoptees or birth mothers react to those relinquishments. There is a real lack of understanding. There was a real lack of understanding, I think, way back then when I was adopted, and I'm not sure of your age, but in that era, that the babies that were just placed, they were taken away from a mother and placed to the new family. And as long as it's a loving family, it's like a bird being taken from a mother and put in another nest. Well, they're still getting fed and they're going to learn to fly. Everything should be fine. I completely understand that. I think I grew up most of my life thinking that's what I was told. And in essence, that's the way my life looked. So why should I feel any different than what I think and what I believe and what the people around me believe? And I believe really deeply that your vantage point, I should say, and your process of understanding the adoption and who you are is completely valid. No adoptee should say, you need to feel like I feel. So an adoptee that has not struggled with the relinquishment or feeling those sense of abandonment, somebody like yourself who is still, stay at home and never felt those, should not be able to really tell another adoptee, why do you feel that way? I don't feel that.
Right. Yeah. And having a number of friends in my life who have also adopted children, friends and family members who have, it's become evident over a lot of years that there are a million different avenues for how you deal with or address all of these issues. From, have you ever wanted to meet the birth parents? Have you had any difficulty adjusting? Has there ever been a moment when you wished, I wish I had said no? I mean, there's some real serious questions that are entangled in a wonderful blessing. Okay, so here I am sitting here talking to Kevin Barhydt, and I can't be more thankful for my mom and dad, for Bill and Mary Hobson, who, by the way, at some point will be listening to this conversation. They're supporters of this program, and I can't imagine life going any other way, which ties me back into really a core tenet of my faith, which is all of these things are orchestrated by the Lord, who knew of them before I was ever even formed. Well, if you're able to take that sort of perspective with you, I think it releases a lot of anxiety. Like, what was wrong with me? Why was I dropped off? I don't know I have no idea what the deal was, but why was I made available? Right. So if you view these things in light of, man, God had an incredible plan for my life. And I'm so thankful that it all happened. I'm 52. So it happened in 1968. So Roe v. Wade was still 5 years away. An entirely different world. I'm not going to get political, but it was an entirely different world at that time. Right. And none of these things happen by accident. So, Kevin's not an accident. I'm not an accident. I sometimes have an accident, but that's a completely different matter. So, Kevin, what helps shape your worldview when when you think about these matters? Is it a foundation of faith, or did you come to this perspective some other way?
I think it's important for me to briefly just say, hi, Bill and Mary. It's such an honor to say hello to you. And I want to say really briefly, it's an honor to meet your son. And it's an honor to be a part of this conversation between all of us. And I know we were talking just a second ago, and I said, no one person should tell another person that they should feel a certain way. And I want to really just finish my little sentence there, which was, as much as I wouldn't want an adoptee who seems to have no issues to tell me I should have no issues, the other way, the inverse, is absolutely just as accurate. Because I've struggled doesn't mean that you need to recognize you should struggle with something. I think the important thing for me from a faith perspective is that I have a friend, Diane Cameron, who's another writer, and she writes on beautifully spiritual and faith-centric issues. She and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago. We had some oysters and our salad. That's what we do, oysters and salad, and have this deep, usually profound spiritual conversation, maybe not too many revelations. And she speaks of it. I said, how do you do that? How do you write about it? How do you talk about it? And Diane says, with a light touch. And so I try to approach these conversations with a light touch. My faith is pretty specific. I've been in the 12-step programs for 35 years. I have been clean and sober since January 1, 1986. And I think that's really had a great effect on me as to not only my own path, my own discovery of my higher power as it's spoken of there, but also my respect for other people to have their own higher power. And to speak of the Lord, to speak of Jesus, to speak of Buddha or Allah, or use any phraseology that's helpful is really acceptable to me. For my life and my day, there's a very specific understanding of God. There's a really specific understanding when I wake up in the morning, and I just got done just 10 minutes ago because I was a little late starting this morning with my morning readings, my prayer, and my meditation time. I know who I'm talking to. I know what that means to me. I know how important that is to me. It did not come easy. I mean, not only was I adopted, or as I say, relinquished, and I felt those, that we call it the primal wound. That's one of the phraseologies that helps a great deal. And there's a book called The Primal Wound about the separation neurologically that happens to babies and birth mothers at that separation. Maybe if that was the only thing that had ever happened to me, maybe if you and I were just only adopted, everything would have been a little easier. But when I was 9, and you know my story a bit, I was molested. I was molested by a leader at a 4-H group, which is an environmental kind of Boy Scouts type group. Now that really changed me. That rewired me. So now I've got 2 rewirings going. And then when I was 11, my dad got ill. He had a heart attack. He had been ill for a while. We didn't know what was wrong. He had a heart attack and then heart surgery. And then very quickly after that, I had my first drink. And that led to a whole slew of incidences that are pretty hard to talk about publicly and pretty hard for some people to hear about. But there was more abuse. There was more drug addiction. There were arrests. And there was things like prostitution. There was a life I lived that most people wouldn't want to think about, much less live. But coming out on the other side of that, and I will say this, the hardest thing coming out on the other side of that was knowing that there was a God, knowing that there was someone that had carried me through that all this had to be for some reason, somehow, somewhere. And I didn't feel worthy at all. I felt like I was the most unworthy, unlikely recipient of God's love. Matter of fact, that's what made me feel like I shouldn't even be here. Suicidal, feeling like I should have been annihilated, maybe, and this is the one you'll understand, never been born at all. It was a mistake. You said I wasn't a mistake. I felt like, oh my goodness, maybe Roe v. Wade. Again, we're not trying to be political here, but maybe I should not have even been conceived. Maybe I should have not even, been thought of ever. But it took a long time. Those years were really tough. I had about 5 years where I struggled trying to find an understanding of a God in my life. I was raised in a religion that was Christian-based, and I had not rejected that or embraced that. I just knew it. I just understood it, and my family still believes it. And I tried that, and I tried other things, and finally I realized, and this is, I think, really important to express, that maybe it was just me coming in from a recovering alcoholic and addict perspective. But, I was a high school dropout who couldn't spell his last name by the time I got sober. And if I think that I can find God, I might be barking up the wrong tree. So my prayer had to become this. After 5 years, I gave up looking for God. And every day I would say, God, I know that you are, but I don't know who you are. I can't find you. Please lead me to you. And over the next year, every day I'd wake up and I still didn't know who God was because I didn't feel like I was being led. Those were the hardest days. Those were the loneliest, darkest days. Even when I had spent a year as a supposed atheist, I didn't feel, the dryness. But this was like a Mother Teresa dryness. This was a God doesn't even know me dryness. But when I started hearing that little bit of a pull, that little bit of a voice, it was from a very specific Christian bent, a very specific understanding of God. And I didn't want to listen. Matter of fact, my prayer changed. I would say every night, God, I know that you are, but I don't know who you are. I can't find you. Please lead me to you, but please don't make me be one of them. I would just, jokingly, half jokingly say, don't lead me in that direction. And every day I'd have to say, no, I can't find you. Lead me to you. So that's been a really wonderful, but sometimes torturous journey. And as I've learned what my relationship with God is going to be, I've tried not to build it on anyone telling me what it should be. I've tried to build it on me asking God to lead. And it's happened, and it's been extraordinary. And my wife and I and my family are all in that faith, and we are very strong, I think, in our belief system. And if nothing else, we're strong in our trust of each other as a family. I have a wife and 2 boys, and they're probably not going to listen to this. So, they do and they don't. They know I'm here now. They just know this message. They know this from their hearts. As a family, we will support each other in that search. We will support each other in the darkness. If one of us isn't feeling, and I have felt that way, oh my goodness, if I can say that my faith, my belief in God has always been robust and as strong as I feel it is this morning, I'd be really barking up the wrong tree. And you'd know it because you've been through that too. I can tell just by talking to you. We have days of darkness. We have days of traveling this thing. But I don't need to run a marathon every day spiritually. I just need to remember I was built for this world. I was built to be with God. I was built to walk this walk. And however I do that is kind of my business, but it's important to share it with the people that I know and I love. And one-on-one is probably the most profound way that I do that. And I find it to be extraordinary, because when I'm sharing my love of my higher power, of my God, and that relationship, and that's the big word, is relationship. When I'm sharing that with another person like I am with you right now, the conduit is complete, right? This isn't me talking to you anymore. This is our higher power. This is God talking through us. I hope that answers your question.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is Kevin Barhydt, and as he shares his journey, and you heard in the prior moments, for those of you who have been listening to us in podcast form or watching us in the video form on the website at bigimpactradio.com, or for those of you who have just tuned in on the radio, as you hear Kevin share kind of the foundation or the seeds of his journey, you know that we're leading now to the discussion of his search. This was leading to a search for his biological story, his parents, Kevin being adopted. So after you have the encounter with the lady who kind of sent you on that direction, Kevin, how do you even start? How does the search begin? You step out the front door and you start asking random people, is there any chance that you maybe... How did you even begin looking for your birth mom?
I'm gonna riff off of that for a minute because it's a wonderful conversation to have. I didn't step out the front door. I stepped out the back door and literally walked across the street to the adoption agency. And I'm not kidding you. I'll explain. The wonderful thing that happened was Roz, who was this birth mother who was helping me, said, Kevin, more than anything else, remember that this is a process and you need to take your time. And so I was moving. I was going to a new job. I was moving to a new house. We were moving from Brooklyn, New York to Schenectady, New York, Niskayuna, with a wife and 2 kids. And she said, Kevin, just settle in, but I'll be here for you when you're ready. And so I started at my new job, Empire State College in upstate New York, Saratoga, beautiful town. I started my new job. First day, parked the car, went in, did everything I needed to do. Leaving at the end of the day, unbeknownst to me, I went out the back door. You said the front door, but I walked out the back door on that very first day. and there was not a lot of cars left in the parking lot, so I could see clearly. And as I'm going to my car, I literally look across the street, and there's a bunch of these beautiful, kind of Victorian houses, but smaller houses in Saratoga. They're beautifully colored. And there's one that stands out because it has a little shingle on it. It's not a house, it's a business. And it says Catholic Charities. And I just looked, my jaw dropped. Every bell and whistle, it was almost like, are you kidding me, God? You know, I didn't even get through a whole day at work, and you want me to start focusing on this. And I just said, okay. And I didn't walk across the street that moment, but that's what started me off. It was really, again, trusting in that there is a point to this. There is someone that's leading me, something that's guiding me, but I don't have to rush and I don't have to run. But I did that. I slowly, it was a 2-year period of time from 2005 to 2007 when I cracked the door open with Roz's help. And then I approached the director of Catholic Charities, which when I was a child was Catholic Family Services, and that's where I was adopted. And I talked to them, and it was a very long process. In New York, the laws are so stringent that no one can give you anything except what's called non-identifiable information. It's almost like getting this, CIA folder that says, everything's blacked out.
It's redacted.
You can have a couple,
yeah.
You know what I mean? You can have a couple of little specks here, like all the, maybe a state but not a town.
Yeah.
Maybe a hair color, an eye color, all that non-identifiable. And that was fine because I was not doing this because I knew what the outcome would be. I wasn't doing this because I knew the search would make me into a better person, a more whole person. I just understood that I was being guided. That search, that decision to search wasn't something I took lightly. It wasn't like I just talked to Roz and said, let's do it. I talked to my wife. I talked to my children. I talked to my adoptive parents. I prayed, because there was no reason for me to do this, quote unquote. But something was inside that told me maybe this is a path you want to go down.
Would you say the greater motivation was to learn what was transpiring in your birth mother's life, or was your greater motivation trying to figure out why she gave you up? I think those are two different questions.
They are, and I think that those are really two of probably a dozen or so questions that are more prominent in many adoptees' life or in many people's life. Even if you weren't adopted, you might have had a family history of saying, well, why did that happen? Right? Why was this, this space of 5 years in my youth that seemed very tumultuous? Why was dad struggling? Why was mom struggling? Why? And we don't know some of those things because people tend not to tell those things to children. And they don't want to make them secrets, but by making them less prominent in a discussion, they actually make them more prominent in someone's psyche, right? By not saying what happened, it makes it the elephant in the room. So there was, I think, a little bit of a piece of me that wanted to know the hard things. Maybe was she a prostitute that had been arrested? Maybe was she a drug addict? Back then, a little less likely in many ways. Was she what everyone thought and told me she was? This lovely, wonderful Catholic woman who just, for some reason, couldn't take care of her kids. What was the story? I think more for me than anything else, I was pretty humble in my wants, and what I wanted more than anything was to, of course, just it almost tears up when you talk about this. So I wanted to hear her voice.
Yeah.
I didn't care what she said. I wanted to sit, if you want to know, I wanted to sit in a field with the sun shining, and maybe it was the hippie days of the 60s and 70s, but I wanted her to be playing guitar with long flowing hair and singing a gentle song.
Yeah.
I didn't even need her to talk to me. I just needed her to hear her voice, to see her face. And there's only one thing that I thought I not deserved, not entitled to, but that I would love to have. And it was just, I wish I just had a picture of her so I could know what she looked like around the time I was born. That's all I ever wanted. That's all I was ever looking for.
And there have been times, and perhaps some of our listeners can relate to this, there have been times where I've heard stories of adopted adult children wanting this moment to scream and yell, to say, what on earth? Why did you do this to me? And again, as you said very eloquently earlier, everybody's story and everybody's perspective is unique in this. I can't imagine ever wanting to scream and yell at anybody in regards to this. Again, being thankful for where I am in life and tracing it very clearly to my parents and to the Lord's working through all of this. And now realizing it partially, Kevin, might be connected to the longevity of this program, realizing that everybody has a story. Everybody. It doesn't matter what line of work you're in. It doesn't matter what your family composition is. Everybody has a story. And I would have to think that especially pre-1973, not that it's different after, but a little bit different afterwards, but pre-1973 and the legal changes in our culture, when out of wedlock, perhaps pregnancy was really, really frowned upon, that there had to be some really frightened young ladies who didn't know what to do. And in my world, what I would most like to do is just interview that lady who 52-ish years ago just said, I can't do this, and somehow, set into motion a chain of events. Was there any part of you that was angry? Was there any part of you that was ready to just give a lecture? Or was this a sincere seeking of information and just to kind of follow up? And by the way, we'll talk about your book here in a couple of moments, because I know you've collected a lot of these thoughts.
That's a great question. Was I ever wanted? I want to just, no, I never wanted to yell at her. I think that's the answer. No. I want to just briefly touch on that idea of yelling at someone or talking to someone, or just even the biggest one, listening to someone. And all those, in essence, I'll get it back to the conversation we had a few minutes ago about a relationship with God. I know there's been times when I have prayed, and there's been times when I've listened, right? Asked for God to guide me. And there's been times when I've beat the steering wheel with tears flowing down my cheeks and yelled. But every one of those specific instances, and the hundreds of thousands of millions of more ways that I've had communication with my higher power, with God, it's a relationship that builds. So I don't think that anyone who's ready to yell at their adoptive mother is in the wrong, is misguided. I think that that's probably where they're at in the moment. And quite possibly, that might be the beginning of that relationship that needs to heal. So for me, I was rather blessed. And it goes without saying that I'm 35 years sober. So by the time I started my search, I had, number one, started to early on looked at the drugs and alcohol and got extraordinary relief from that through God lifting that desire to use drugs and alcohol. I had also been abused. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it till I was 2 years sober, when it really just finally was taught to me. There was a language for children who have been sexually abused. And when I started to learn that language, I had to grapple with that. That's a lot to grapple with. I'll tell you, if there was a time when I wanted to yell, it was then. But the process of healing through that over the years brought me, and this was what I could never have seen coming, to the place. I got sober in 1986. It wasn't until 2005 when I was in a place spiritually where I was ready to begin that search. If I had started it in 1987, I probably might have been yelling. Who knows? I can't tell you. I don't know. Yeah. But that was the beauty of it. The healing path that you said earlier, that there's a reason, there's a purpose. I got to trust that there's a tomorrow. Saint Francis de Sales, I think it is, one of the saints, said, we learn to walk by walking. We learn to speak by speaking, right? We learn to love God by loving, right? And I think that really speaks loudly to me, because I want to practice loving God. I want to practice that love, because that love is, again, it's all relationship to me. And if I want to trust God, that tomorrow, whatever this search that I'm on is going to lead to whatever God wants it to be, not what I want it to be, I gotta love. I gotta have a relationship. I have to be there today to say, I don't know. I don't know. Is this what you want me to do?
Yeah.
And then take the next step.
We are continuing our conversation with Kevin Barhydt, and time is flying. I kind of knew that would happen as we got into this. So as we head down the down the home stretch, Kevin, let's get to the payoff of this story. Your research, your search for your birth mom. Can you take us to the moment when the search ended?
Yes, I can, and I'm going to not be coy and not be disingenuous. But the actual ending will be here, only because I think it's better read than just drummed.
And for those of you who are listening to us and not watching us on video, Kevin's referring to the book that he has written about this experience. And we'll have the links to the book in the podcast notes and on our website at bigimpactradio.com. So that's just kind of filling in the visual for our audio listeners, Kevin.
That's right. The story that is just on the front of my book tells the whole story. The name of the book is Dear Stephen Michael's Mother, and that will become so evident why I name it's not a random sentence. It's not a random quote. It obviously sounds like the beginning of a letter, doesn't it? Dear Steve, it's a letter. And you'll find out why. There's also 3 pictures on the cover of the book. One is of a little baby, and yes, that's me. I don't know what happened. I was cute. And now there's also 2 pictures on there of 2 beautiful women. And I will tell you now that one is that picture of my adoptive mother, and the other is the picture of my biological mother. It's that picture that I always wanted. Now, the true ending of the story, I believe, will be much more worthy of reading. But it was a 2-year search where through going to the adoption agency, going to the church where I was baptized, looking through records, making phone calls to lawyers and everything, I gathered enough information and pieced it together and eventually concluded my search. How that search ended was both probably one of the most miraculous things in my life and the most devastating. So you will have to read the story to find out how that ends. But I will say that if the movie Silver Linings Playbook had not been titled already, I would probably name this book Silver Linings Playbook, because it's a story of 2 stories, isn't it? This search is one story, but it's also what happened after I was adopted until I got sober. And as those 2 stories kind of roll out as a mystery, both of them a mystery, you know that the guy's okay. You know I'm okay because I'm writing the book, but as the story unfolds, you kind of wonder how. How. And I hope that's the hope and the maybe inspiration and maybe motivation that other people will find in the book that will either maybe allow them to search for their things in their life. Doesn't have to be their biological parents, but maybe some form of healing that they need.
So without diving into the spoilers, because we do want people to get the book, how different is Kevin Barhydt today, having met Mom, having fulfilled the search? What would have been different in your life had you searched diligently but just never been able to find her?
There's a lot of different things that have changed in me. I think that I'm more confident now that there was always a purpose in my life. There were moments in this story that you will find, again, without the spoilers, and I appreciate that, when there's no doubt in my mind, that from the minute I was conceived and even before, I had a role to play. And we call those maybe those white light moments, those moments when you say, I get it. Everything about my life has led to this moment. And I see now that I was never not wanted because I was always wanted by God. I was never not loved because I was always loved by God. And I was never without direction. I just had to be open to that direction. There are moments today in my life that, of course, I feel lost. There are moments today when I struggle with doubt and, even cynicism, about what I'm doing, about writing this book, about having a YouTube channel, about having this conversation, right? Sometimes you just have that self-doubt. But I have those understandings now in my life. So I can tell you that the The conclusion of the search changed me in many ways, gave me information, helped me to understand my origin, so to speak, made me part of family that I never had, made me understand what family is. As a matter of fact, my mantra is family is family. Nothing else is family. Family is family. That's it. And I understand that probably deeper now than anything. But again, the search was never to get what I thought I needed. The search was to trust that I would be guided to get what I did need and what was of purpose. I think more than anything else, what I've been given is this understanding that my whole life is not about what I can get, but what I can give. And I have another phrase for that, which is 8 words, to be of service to God and others. And that's everything that I've learned through this search. I never did it to try to heal myself. I did it to try to just I wanted to honor my relationship with God that was leading me to this for some reason. And I'll tell you, it was a long journey, but I'm so grateful I went on it.
Well, Kevin, I think the words in the introduction to A Purpose-Driven Life, the global bestseller by Rick Warren, the first question asked in that book is, what on earth am I here for? And the one sentence answer is, it's not about you. And the entire premise that follows is making an impact in the lives of others. It's a simple message to read, but man, is it a difficult message to implement in one's life. And so I'm really encouraged to hear you share that perspective, because there are, I'm going to say this gently, there are a lot of excuses from your past that you could fall back on to become selfish. All right, so you've been through severe trauma. You've been through worldview questioning. You've been through addiction. You've been through, I mean, we can just keep going with the list. And for far too many people, they have chosen to forever sit in those situations. I'm not diminishing the impact of those things, but you're not defined by those things. Kevin Barhydt, if somebody says to me, so what was that guy, what was that like in the conversation? I'm not going to come away and say, oh man, the guy's just a victim. You know, it's just nonstop. He's frozen in his tracks. He can't do anything. You have chosen not to be defined by those things. And that to me is one of the most encouraging messages to take away from our time together today. So I want to thank you for having that perspective, for sharing it, because this is uncomfortable stuff sometimes to share. And again, we want to encourage our listeners to explore your story, to get that book and to learn what it was that was the big payoff at the end of that search and how it helped shape your life. So really, thank you so much for opening your life, your family, and your heart to us.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative. I love this conversation. You're right. I wish we could just keep going, and I'm sure we would enjoy the next hour or two.